Last year, Jennette McCurdy released her memoir, I'm Glad My Mom Died. And with a title like that, you would expect an incredibly painful book, and that is absolutely what she delivered. So whenever I found out that this year she released a fiction novel surrounding themes that are just as heavy, I decided I had to give it a read. So in this week's video, I'll be reading Half His Age by Jennette McCurdy. I'm super excited! ASMR package opening. Okay, it's time to open the package. Whoa, this is way bigger than I thought. Oh, I bought large print. Oh man. Ah, it's ruined. I'm returning this. It's like oil soaked into it. Green oil. I'm sad. For one, it's large print. I could get over that, right? What the hell? Let's first read the summary because I just looked at the back and it looks very interesting. Waldo is ravenous. Horny, blunt, naive, wise, impulsive, lonely, angry, forceful, hurting, perceptive, endlessly wanting. Goddamn, that was so many adjectives. And the thing she wants most of all, Mr. Corgi, her creative writing teacher with the wife and the kid and the mortgage and the bills, with the dead dreams and the atrophied looks and the growing paunch. She doesn't know why she wants him. Is it his passion, his life experience, the fact that he knows books and films and things that she doesn't? Or is it purer than that, rooted in their unlikely connection, their kindred spirits, the similar filter with which they take in the world around them? Or perhaps it's just enough that he sees her when no one else does. Startling perspective, mordantly funny, and keenly poignant, Half His Age is a rich character study of a yearning 17-year-old who disregards all obstacles or attempts to overcome them in her effort to be seen, to be desired, to be loved. That already sounds so freaking good, so I cannot wait to start this, but of course, I'm gonna have to return this book. I don't know if I should return it after I read it or before, because I need to start it. But I'll get back to you guys whenever I finally figured something out. Okay, I'm back because I forgot to talk about my initial thoughts. So obviously I am excited to start this book. I know that Jennette McCurdy is already a strong author because I read her memoir and that was really well done. So I'm expecting a similar author's voice in this one. She just kind of tells you the facts as they are, especially regarding traumatic events. And I think that kind of separation from the fact of the matter and then separately what the person is experiencing while being traumatized in such a way will allow us to better reflect on what's actually happening. And I have heard that this book is disgusting, as it should be, because we're hearing about a predatory relationship between a teacher and a young student. So I'm looking to be disgusted. Like, I want to be disturbed by this book because it is a disturbing circumstance. So I think this book is going to make me scream. Like, it's going to be uncomfortable. And I'm sure there are going to be moments where I want to put the book down, but I don't imagine the book is going to be told with super high emotions because, like I've said, I just think Jennette McCurdy is going to say it how it is. But we'll see. Those are just my initial thoughts. I haven't started the book yet, but I am about to. So I'll see you guys as soon as I have more thoughts. I have so much to say, but for real, like, I have a lot to say. I'm 34% through this book and it's going by so freaking quickly. The style of writing that Jennette McCurdy employs in this book, it's very blunt. It's very straightforward. There's not a lot of emotional depth, in my opinion. I do believe that the way that she's writing is intentional, but it is pretty interesting. So let me give you guys an example. I polish off my lasagna with whatever taste buds survive that first bite, then wash my face, brush my teeth, and pick my zits, even though I know I shouldn't. I get in bed but can't sleep, so instead I scroll. I end my night by loading up a cart on Shein despite the damning ethics of fast fashion, because it's the only place you can get a pair of pants for 12 bucks. The cancer warning comes up on all the items, which I appreciate because it helps me prioritize my cart. Velvet trousers, not worth the cancer. Crop top, it stays. So as you can tell, the language is very bare, almost. We kind of have to interpret what she's trying to communicate through this very dry delivery. And I actually do really like that because I think especially when we start getting into the heavier topics, it'll be nice to have such a blatant upfront delivery of what's going on, because then we have to interpret it and understand why it's so gross and why it feels so weird, because she's just delivering us the facts. So then we are the ones experiencing the emotion that comes out of those words, if that makes any sense. I guess it's important that I give you guys a summary, so let's talk about Margot. Guys, this entire update I call her Margot, but her name is Waldo. Where I got that from, I literally don't know. So just imagine, every time I say Margot, I
I mean Waldo, okay? I'm sorry.
She's a 17-year-old girl, and she's really having a lot of trouble connecting to her peers, and especially to the guys that she's starting to hook up with. And the way that Jennette writes sexual encounters in this book is super disturbing because, like I said, we're reading the blunt facts of it all, and it's so raw and bare that it just feels gross. Like, it really just feels gross. None of it feels like an intimate connection. None of it feels special, and that is absolutely intentional because this character, Margot, is struggling with her ability to feel loved and to feel intimately connected with somebody. And a lot of that is due to her trauma that she's experienced with her mother. Her mom is someone that's struggling to find a partner and bringing all of those boyfriends home and into Margot's life. And Margot is just watching this rotation of men come in and out of her mom's life and destroy her. And her mom is ultimately somebody that craves male validation, and that person is somebody that Margot is directly witnessing. So Margot is starting to develop some of those tendencies. And Margot's mom acts like she's somebody that's intimately involved in Margot's life, but she really isn't. She's often out of the house or at her boyfriend's or bringing her boyfriend over and not connecting to Margot deeply. And it's really, really upsetting because obviously this is influencing Margot's sense of self. She is pretty self-aware for a 17-year-old. And although she's come to terms with the fact that she doesn't really value herself, she doesn't really admit that openly. But she does have a pretty self-aware internal monologue, and this is something that she thinks about herself, which is so, so upsetting. Maybe wanting things is what makes me a lot. If I could just want less, I'd be the right amount of person, the amount I'm supposed to be, the not a lot amount, the easy to love amount. So obviously she has a lot of problems regarding self-love, and she's struggling with the capability of being loved. She has a problem accepting that love and feeling intimately connected with people because of her trauma. But she really, really, really desires connection, and she's seeking it out in these sexual partners, but she's never feeling that intimate connection. So that's where Mr. Corgi comes in. Mr. Corgi is her 40-year-old creative writing teacher who's paying particular attention to Margot because she's just so vulnerable in her creative writing prompts. She basically talks openly about her messed up relationship with her mom, and obviously in my grown-up mind, I'm understanding that Mr. Corgi is paying particular attention to her because she's a vulnerable young girl, but in her mind, she's thinking Mr. Corgi is seeing her like no other man has, and she falls in love with him almost instantly because of how vulnerable he was on the first day of school when he admits that he's a failure, and it's because he didn't pursue his creative writing passion, and he instead chose the safe route of being a teacher. So quickly, Mr. Corgi starts crossing boundaries between their student and teacher relationship, and he invites Margot to his house to have dinner with him and his wife. But whenever the wife steps away, this is what happens. As the steps grow quieter, we just look at each other, neither of us saying a word, just staring, until the footsteps disappear completely and we keep staring. What should be an uncomfortable moment is strangely intimate, a silent agreement made with our locked eyes. We don't need to engage in small talk, you and I. We have a real connection. So obviously, that is super, super, super disturbing because whether or not Margot is perceiving this, Mr. Corgi is laying the groundwork for her to start developing these feelings because he's crossing so many boundaries that should obviously be in place in his adult mind. So obviously, this developing relationship is disgusting, and I think Jennette McCurdy is doing a great job of writing that into the prose in a way that you can't ignore. So even in moments when we're not in a sexual encounter, we still feel uncomfortable. So here's an example of that. This is a moment when Mr. Corgi actually calls Waldo. I think I've been calling her Margot this whole time. Her name's Waldo, I'm sorry. So this is whenever Margot basically offers to go on a walk with Mr. Corgi, and he's kind of like awkward about it. The offer hangs in the air for a second. The kind of second where a full 4-course meal of emotions is devoured within it. Regret, then nervousness, then anticipation, then dread. All chewed and swallowed and partially digested, mixed with saliva and swirling around, just waiting and waiting and waiting. So obviously that was a moment of tension between Margot and Mr. Corgi. I said Margot again. Waldo and Mr. Corgi. And it's not inherently a horrible situation, it's just a moment of silence, but the scene in its entirety, us knowing that Waldo, a 17-year-old girl, is asking Mr. Corgi, a 40-year-old man and her teacher, to go on a walk, and the fact that he's even having to take a break in between that before answering no, that is what's so gross. And so her prose, detailing the saliva and the swallowed and partially digested words of that moment, of that empty moment, is so powerful. So I'm really, really enjoying this kind of raw writing style that Jennette McCurdy employed for this book. I think it works really well regarding the subject matter. Okay, there's one more moment that I want to talk about, and this moment is when they're on their walk, which yes, they did end up going on a walk together. And in Waldo's internal monologue, she says, "He asked me about my future and I asked him about his past, and something in that feels heavy. The assumption that my life is ahead of me and his is behind him. That 20 years is the difference between a life that's considered yet to be lived and one that's considered over." So that's pretty powerful again, because as we know, she's a child. He is a full-grown man with a wife and a kid. This this relationship that he's allowing is disgusting, and Jennette McCurdy's writing makes that pretty obvious if you didn't already have that in the back of your mind. And like that last piece of the text showed, we are in Waldo's perspective, so I also think it's important that we're getting this blunt, dry delivery because it does feel like Waldo is a little bit depressed, or at least living her life a little bit removed from reality. It's seeming like she's having trouble connecting with everybody. All of her replies to people are very short, and she's either saying thank you or sorry. It really doesn't feel like she has very many intimate connections, and it also seems like she uses doom scrolling and online shopping to cope with that reality every single night, and it's so sad. And with all that being said, I am enjoying this book. I think Jennette McCurdy is doing a great job talking about a situation that could so easily veer into weird territory. So that's all I have to say for now. I'll update you guys as soon as I have more thoughts. Hey guys, I'm back with an update. I'm a little bit low energy. Nothing's wrong. I don't know why, so just don't mind that. But I am officially 77% through. I have been marking up this book pretty extensively because there are quite a few moments that I think we should address. Since I last updated you guys, their relationship has progressed to a disturbing level. I'm sure you can imagine all that entails, but I did mark a very specific moment that grossed me out so bad. Like, it grossed me out so bad. So much of this book is grossing me out, but this moment specifically is going to be very hard for me to read. So let's get to it. At this point in the book, there's a high school party going on at the school, and Mr. Corgi, who's been absent for the past week, comes back to school and finds Waldo in his classroom. She's actually smelling his chair as he walks in. And anyways, he ends up explaining the reason why he was absent from school, and she offers to hug him. He doesn't respond, which I take as a yes. I step toward him and hug him, but he doesn't move, so I lift his arms and extend them to wrap around me. His sweat stains press against me, bleeding through the armpits of his button-down. I run my hands along his back and rest my head on his chest, breathing him in. We stay here, suspended in each other's arms. And then I feel him grow. Now I know, undeniably, he wants me, or at least his body does. Maybe his mind feels guilty about it, tangled up in morals and society and everything else, but his body wants mine, and mine wants his. And bodies don't overthink and worry and analyze and doubt. Bodies just do. I can't get that out of my head. It's so gross. And I'm sure you can imagine something along the lines of what happens after that. Keep in mind, she is 17, he is 40, this is her teacher. They are literally in the school building, and it's super gross. It's super gross. A sexual relationship develops after that moment, and he eventually starts coming to her house to pursue sexual encounters. And this moment that I'm about to read is not sexual, but it is incredibly intimate because it's Waldo's specific experience with her poorness. He's been impressed by me writing about where I come from, but seeing it live and in person is a different thing. People worry poorness will rub off on them and the bad taste that comes with it. They'll read a book about it or watch a movie where Jennifer Lawrence pretends to be poor while her $800 highlights gleam in her close-ups, but they don't want to actually know it. Be close to it in any kind of real way, except maybe cutting a check for $1,000 or $2 around the holidays to the Salvation Army or the Red Cross. But is that even exposing themselves to it really? Or just a way of distancing themselves from it even more? So obviously being of a low income bracket is something that is incredibly familiar to Waldo, but it's also something that has brought her a lot of shame because of everyone else's expectations and reactions to her circumstances. So obviously that is super sad, and it just exposes even more how disturbing Mr. Corgi is, because he's literally preying on not only a child, but a child in an incredibly compromised position. It's just so gross and so predatory. Obviously, like, he's a predator, and it's really disturbing to read about, especially when they start going on dates. Like, what are you actually talking about? And actually, I'm remembering that one of the waitresses actually compliments Mr. Corgi because she needed to tell him that it was so sweet he was taking his daughter out to lunch. So nasty. Like, it's actually so freaking nasty. So let's get even more disturbed while I read this description of their date. In summary, Mr. Corgi has brought Waldo to a lookout, and with him, he's brought a charcuterie board and a bottle of wine for him and a bottle of sparkling cider for me. I want the wine. He's hesitant but relents when I tell him my mom lets me have it. Her mom lets her have it? That was such a smart decision by the author to just reiterate how much of a child we are dealing with. Mr. Corgi intentionally brought Waldo sparkling cider because he knows how dramatically underage she is, but he somehow doesn't see the irony in the fact that he's taking her on a date and they're eating charcuterie board and he's drinking wine, but her mom would let her have the wine. Like, it's crazy. And she did that so well. To include little details like that is so smart because obviously the story is disturbing, but to have the prose convincingly relay those feelings, even though we're reading through Margot's perspective, somebody that is infatuated by Mr. Corgi and doesn't yet see how much her life is going to take a turn for the worst because of his actions, is very impressive. And speaking of how much she wants to impress him, this is actually the perfect passage to jump into, although it is so nasty. I'm going to be internally cringing reading this to you guys, but I do think it's important because it shows how vulnerable she is and how much she has convinced herself that this is the guy for her when it's so obvious to the reader that she is being abused. We twist around so I'm on top, my knee pressing into the Cheerio crumbs ground into the seat cushion, because keep in mind, Corgi has a little toddler kid, like ew. And he tells me that I feel amazing and he asks me if I'm a good girl and I say yes. Right. And then I ride him like the good girl that I am, the girl who loves him, who only wants to please him, to make things easier for him, to be exactly what he wants, what he needs. The girl who hopes that if I wedge myself into a doll, a dream, a marionette with lifeless eyes, porcelain skin, and no needs of my own, a doll who indulges his fantasies and maybe then he will love me too. Disturbing, possibly the most disturbing thing I've ever read on camera. Thank you. I don't even know what to say about that. I feel like Jennette explained it pretty well, so I'm going to leave you with this last quote. At the point of the book in which I am at, Waldo is beginning to understand that she does not take precedent in Mr. Corgi's life. He is still prioritizing his family and his job and his friends. He has a life outside of her, but right now her entire world revolves around him. And she's starting to feel that imbalance and she doesn't like it. So she does eventually confront him about that, but he basically just gaslights her into apologizing about being jealous. And Mr. Corgi says, I want to do this on your terms and your terms only. If this ever stops working for you or feeling good for you, we can stop. We will stop, he says, as if it's a kind thing to say. And I'm sure that it is. I know that it is, that he's saying it to protect me. So why then does it feel like a threat? I don't want to stop, I say, my eyes hungry and wild, survival mode clicking in. Are you sure? He asks. I'm not sure how in a matter of 10 seconds I somersaulted from being the one seeking reassurance from him to being the one asked to give it to him, but regardless, I want to stick the landing. I'm sure, I say. I don't want to stop. Just how obviously she's being abused is pretty cut and dry to the readers, but she is barely coming to these terms herself, and maybe she's not even, because he's just doing such a good job at making it feel like she is the one in control. But keep in mind, she is 17. He is her 40-year-old teacher. This is disgusting and disturbing, and he is abusing her. But whether he's tried to convince himself that that's not the case, or whether the fact that Waldo is so seemingly on board is making him feel like she is, but she is not the one with the power. And Jennette's writing is really making that obvious. It is so gross. Like, it is so disturbing to read, and that's all intentional. So I am curious where we're gonna go, because as I told you guys, they started going on dates, they started having more regular sexual encounters, but we've recently come to a kind of standstill because Corgi went on vacation with his wife, and he's come back with a changed perspective about Waldo and his relationship. So I'm very curious to see what happens. This book in its entirety is really reminiscent of Miller's Girl, if you guys have seen that movie with Jenna Ortega. It's basically the exact same plot line. So I'm wondering if we're going to have a similar ending. I don't know, but I'm curious to find out. So I'm going to finish this book, and in my next update, we will talk about my concluding thoughts. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. It's officially time to talk about my final thoughts regarding this book. I finished it last night and I'm still struggling a bit regarding how to rate it, so I think after talking to you guys about it, it'll clear my mind up a bit. Firstly, I just want to commend the author because I can imagine it's pretty daunting taking on a book with such heavy themes, but I think she did so pretty well. Although my main gripe with the book is that I think that there was depth there that could have been explored that we never got to. So ultimately, the exploration regarding such heavy topics to me ended up feeling a little bit young adult, which obviously we are reading about a 17-year-old, so it makes sense. But I think especially regarding childhood trauma, having the perspective of your older adult self after having went through that experience and then thinking back on it, I think you realize a lot about yourself and your circumstances and the situation in general that gives you a lot of perspective that allows you to dig deeper. So because we ended this novel with Waldo still being so young, I think we ended up missing out on a lot of really deep discussions that would have ultimately made this book feel a little bit more more well-rounded. And although Waldo is young, she does have a lot of self-aware moments, and she does come to a lot of realizations that I don't think are necessarily realistic for a 17-year-old, but I think in the context of this novel are incredibly helpful to include. Specifically moments like this one. Nolan is the boy that Waldo ends up dating to distract herself from her feelings about Mr. Corgi, and this is Nolan basically breaking up with Waldo. I think we need to stop seeing each other. It's not that I don't agree with his decision to break up with me, it's just that I'm surprised. I thought he liked me so much. I thought he was the chaser, and I thought the chaser always keeps chasing, but maybe they don't. Maybe only chasers with low self-esteem keep chasing. So obviously she's been chasing Mr. Corgi, so this realization on her side is pretty introspective, especially as a 17-year-old who's being manipulated as we speak. So for her to realize that this tendency that she has to chase men is ultimately born of this incredibly deep-rooted issue of her inherent self-loathing and self-esteem issues is pretty big to admit. So I did really appreciate all of those moments, although I didn't find them particularly realistic. But honestly, based on all the media and information that's out there, maybe 17-year-olds would have these kind of understandings nowadays because the internet is at their fingertips and they can just research whatever they're curious about. I think one of the biggest moments of clarity for Waldo was understanding that her idea of Mr. Corgi was all a fantasy. And after she was given the access to him that she was longing for all along, it gave her the space to realize how incompatible they truly were. Like, they really had nothing in common. These people are decades apart. To the reader, that is obvious. But to Waldo, she was so deep in this fantasy that she wasn't even thinking realistically about how they would fit into each other's lives. She was just thinking about this deep hole in her heart that she thought he could fill. And Jennette did a pretty good job writing all of these empty moments into the book. So for instance, they would be at dinner or at lunch and they would fill the empty conversation with discussions regarding what they're gonna eat. And Waldo just felt in her gut that something was missing. Like, something about these conversations were so mundane that they put into perspective how much of a fantasy she had crafted. She also started having revelations regarding their sex life, and specifically that the sex now felt like a performance. It felt like she was trying to embody the past version of herself that desired it so much, because in this current reality, she was not feeling Corgi and it was pretty obvious to her body. Although her mind was trying to convince her otherwise. That's what sex is for me now. Recreating, or attempting to recreate how things were in the beginning, when sex represented the affections, the desires, the wishes, hopes, and dreams, the longing, the promise of what could be, the chemistry, the potential. When sex represented all the things we couldn't say. Now sex represents the apologies, the differences, the disconnection, the mourning, the acceptance, the melancholy for what used to be. Still the things we can't say, just different things. The life that she imagined she would love and that would fulfill her is now the cause of all her rumination, and as a 17-year-old, I can't even imagine how distressing that would feel. So of course, it's pretty heartbreaking, and yes, this story was so gross, it was so nasty at some points, like actually disgusting, but that was obviously the point. We're not meant to feel like these two are meant to be together because they're clearly not, and the way in which the story is told really makes that clear to the reader. So I did appreciate the writing style in that regard, but I do think that it's interesting how similar this writing style felt to I'm Glad My Mom Died, which is Jennette McCurdy's memoir, and at one point the character even talks about how she appreciates simple writing instead of flowery descriptive writing. So I do think that was kind of exposing on Jennette's part, because I can imagine she also feels that way about literature, but obviously, I don't know, I'm just making assumptions. But that part of the book happens whenever Waldo and Mr. Corgi are talking about books, and Mr. Corgi is someone that seems to love descriptive writing. He's almost pretentious about the way that he enjoys film and literature and books, and he almost wants to teach all of those things to Waldo, and she's just so not interested. So that's another one of their big differences. In this section, Waldo says to Corgi, "That's how I feel about writing. I like writing that's simple, plainly stated observations, no fluff. I don't want to hear, it was the kind of gray morning with air so frigid that it makes your bones wail like a creaking staircase. I want to hear, it was a cold Tuesday, my bones hurt. Get to the point, you know?" And that's pretty much how Half His Age felt the entire time. It was just her getting to the point. And yes, I do think that that writing style was complementary to the narrative, but I almost think that that might be part of the reason why I feel the book is lacking, since she's not able to connect with herself deeply and explain what she's feeling inside. The readers also struggle to connect with her deeply and understand what she's feeling inside. And I think while that works in certain parts of the book that I've explained to you guys before, it also keeps us behind this wall that she's put up, and it doesn't allow us that deep connection and that deep understanding and empathy that we could have developed for her. And obviously that could all be intentional. This could be Jennette's reasoning for writing it the way she did. Maybe she doesn't want us to feel deeply connected to Waldo. She's not necessarily the perfect victim, and there is something incredibly powerful about writing that main character into a book like this. But ultimately, I did end up feeling a little bit unsatisfied by the time the novel concluded. So with all that being said, I'm going to rate this book a 3-star. I really enjoyed the overall message, and I actually ended up liking the ending because we were shown just how difficult it is to end generational cycles of emotional torment. And also we were left with the understanding that it is important to listen to your body and listen to your gut, and to ultimately be there for yourself at the end of the day, because you are all that you have. So those are all my thoughts regarding Half His Age by Jennette McCurdy. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope I'll see you in my next video. Bye!